Thank you. Okay, so most of what we'll be doing is a bit of revision of what we have done. It will be repetition, but it cannot harm us. Let's look at this again. So we're going to be talking about the themes and the symbols. You can see the screen here?
Yes, I can.
Okay, great. Let's do that. Let's do that. See if I can bring this a bit in. 91%. See if we can make it a bit bigger. 90. That's 100. Okay, fine. So that again talks about what the theme is. Blah 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 blah. Let's go back. Theme versus subject. It's important not to confuse a theme or literally work with a subject. Let's talk about the theme of conflict again. Conflict in Miller's place. Remember, who's Miller again? What's the guy's name? Who is he?
The writer.
Oh, great. In Miller's play is the inevitable result of belonging in Salem's strained moral and social dynamics. Okay, there are various types of conflict. One, it's cosmic conflict, God versus the devil. There's internal conflict with John Proctor because now he wants to defend himself, but he also wants to not hurt Abigail's feelings, really. So doesn't want to offend her, and then there's conflict within himself with regards to his wife, and then conflict with regards to his name as such. Then there's conflict of ideas, of ideals. The reason people cannot reason properly because of the hysteria that hit them. There's conflict between the individual and the state, and then there's conflict within the community because everyone is now ganging up against each other. There's conflict between husband and wife, and already you can see quite a few pointers coming out of here. Let's talk about the cosmic conflict, the conflict between versus God and the devil. Let you counsel among yourselves. Think on your village and what may have drawn from heaven such thundering wrath upon you all. That's on page 73. Now, the 17th century Puritan worldview saw the battle between God and the devil for Christian souls as a reality. They believed the vigilant Christian should take this conflict as a given and make sure they took every measure to protect their own souls. As Miller points out, this is still not an uncommon belief today for many people. It is hugely influential in thinking about world events, and it requires careful examination as a reality shaping idea. In other words, when we talk about God and where God sits in the cosmos and where everything else sits, they call it's a reality shaping idea. It's still very much a reality to us. Then there's internal conflict within John Proctor. So if they ask you to discuss the internal conflict, it would be this. As one of the central characters, John Proctor represents ideas about conflict in the mind. He is initially conflicted by the guilt he feels for committing adultery with Abigail, number one. His actions with her go against his religion, his own morals, and blemish the love he has for his wife. He is later conflicted by his decision to absolve himself through the Puritan system to publicly confess and perform an act of penance, in other words, where he repent, or instead keep his personal pride by not allowing any public confession of his guilt. So there's that inner conflict. There's 1, 2, 3, 4 points with regards to that. It represents the ideas about conflict in his mind. So when they talk about discuss the internal conflict, you're going to refer to John Proctor. Then you're going to say he's initially conflicted by the guilt he feels for joining with Abigail. His actions with her go against why? His religion, his own morals, and his blemish, and blemishes the love he has for his wife. Then he is later conflicted by his decision to absolve himself through the Puritan system. Why? To publicly confess and perform an act of penance, or instead keep his personal pride by not allowing any public confession of his guilt. So he needs to determine, am I going to publicly confess or am I keeping my pride and my good name? Now there's conflict of ideals. So ideals are, what do we foresee happening in the future? What is your ideal? What's my ideal state? What's your ideal state? Okay. There's the ideal between reason and hysteria. One of the major conflicts in the play is between the reason of the human mind and the irrational fear of hysteria. Like if you have to cross a road and you see and there's loads of traffic coming on, there's the conflict between, do I go now? Do I come back? Do I speed on? Oh my goodness.
Yes.
So it's this is exactly that. It is the reason of the human mind and the irrational fear of hysteria. Several characters try to use reason throughout the trials, yet Miller uses the reasoning of the courts to show the madness of those blinded process. Okay, 1. This absurdity is shown through Deputy Governor Danforth. This is the judge's summary of the witch trials. He explains that because witchcraft is an invisible crime, only the witch and her victim can possibly witness the crime, and the witch would never accuse herself. Therefore, the victim's testimony must always be accurate. Number 2, as a result of this absurd reasoning, the Puritans had no way of objectively finding the truth. This thus removes all objectivity and rational thinking. The victim is then able to make any accusations without any proof. So the victims are making accusations without any proof. So there's thus no objectivity or rational thinking happening. This being the case of a mob mentality can become prevalent, and all are caught up in the result of hysteria. Now we're dealing with conflict between the individual and the state. Salem's ruling theocracy forces citizens to deny their consciences and perjure themselves in order to save their own lives. Okay, let's unpack that. Salem's ruling, so the ruling theocracy, remember that's the ruling of the church and religious leaders, forces citizens to deny their consciousness. Now that's consciences. And perjure themselves. Let's have a look at that word so that we all know what we are talking about. Willfully tell an untruth or make a misrepresentation under oath. To commit perjury is to willfully tell an untruth under oath. So let's look at if that makes sense now. We are talking about conflict between the individual and the state. So what is the state forcing the individual to do? Salem's ruling theocracy forces citizens to deny their consciences and to perjure themselves in order to save their own lives. So now they make false statements under oath to save their own lives. The majority comply, but a few heroic figures resist. 1. Those who resist are marginalized and are the objects of persecution. Those who resist are marginalized and are the objects of persecution. This is shown in the Proctors, Rebecca the nurse, and Goody Corey. Isn't that Giles Corey? That's Giles Corey for me. So in other words, everyone is saying, okay, let's do what they tell us to do. But these guys, Rebecca Nurse and Goody Corey, they all want to tell the truth for what it is. Now the conflict within the community. The accusations of witchcraft provide a smokescreen behind which simmering factional interests are exploited. Okay, so they're saying that the witchcraft is merely providing a smokescreen because there was simmering factual interests. In other words, all the infighting, like between Abigail and Elizabeth, the fighting for the land. So now this is now a smokescreen. I'm going to take you out and say you're a witch, but as long as I can get the land, as long as I can get John. Citizens then use the accusations of witchcraft to gain what? Vengeance, property, or status. Let's look at that. Look at Reverend Paris and the Putnams. Then the tension between John Proctor and his wife Elizabeth are ultimately resolved. Are we talking about conflict between husband and wife? The tensions between John Proctor and his wife Elizabeth are ultimately resolved in the face of the larger threat that confronts them. Both must make difficult decisions about loyalty and morality. This is resolved at the end of the play when Proctor refuses to dishonor his name. So this guy refuses to dishonor his name, and so this is how, or rather, let's say, this is his resolve to this whole thing. Both between him and his wife, they must make decisions based on loyalty and morality. And then there's this big tension between the two of them. Let's move on. We've discussed intolerance, but we can definitely go over that again. The Crucible is set in a theocratic society, and that you must know it is governed by the church or the rulers of the church. The church and the state are one. Religion is a strict, austere form of Protestantism, you know what I mean, known as Puritanism. Then, the theocratic nature of society meant what? Moral laws and state laws are one and the same. Sin and the status of an individual's soul are matters of public concern. There's no room for deviation from social norms. Any individual whose private life does not conform to the established moral laws represent a threat not only to the public good, but also to the rule of God and through religion. There we go. We've discussed this, the intolerance. In Salem, everything and everyone belongs either to God or the devil. Dissent is not merely unlawful, it is associated with satanic activity. The dichotomy we've discussed functions as the underlying logic behind the witch trials. As Danforth says in Act 3, a person is either with his court or he must be counted against it. And then the witch trials are the ultimate expression of intolerance. The trials brand all social deviance with the taint of devil worship. Okay, we've discussed all of this prior to this. We discussed reputation. Various characters base their actions on the desire to protect their own reputation. Paris fears that Abigail's increasing questionable actions and the hints of witchcraft surrounding his daughter's coma will threaten his reputation and force him from the pulpit. John Proctor seeks to keep his good name from being tarnished. We've discussed this as well. The motives we've definitely discussed. The empowerment we've discussed. I think I'm going to send this particular document to you and the other one.
Okay, sir.
Yes, I think that about does it. And I hope this clears up a bit of how they'll be questioning you.
Yes.
Okay. One other thing I would like for you to do is the following. We've obviously discussed the life of Pi. So you need to make a decision. Am I doing the essay on life of Pi or am I doing the essay on
No, I'm gonna do it Crucible. I think it's more. I think that's about the question.
Okay, fine. And then with this one, you're going to do the essay. You just need to have a look at what they are asking. So please go and have a look at previous papers and see how they ask that. And if you can find a memo, just look at how they answered it. So remember the following. They're always looking
Yes.
for facts. They must mark facts.
Oh, okay.
You have an
Okay.
introduction, and then you have your body, which will be a list of facts. All of these things that we've mentioned here are facts.
Okay.
If you mention names, if you mention when it happened, how it happened, those are facts. And it doesn't matter what the essay is, they must mark facts because the facts come from the book.
Okay. In that case, no problem. I'll do that. I will also change the questions and then
Okay.
prepare more. And then I'll go through this document as soon as you send them.
Okay, I'll do that
But
now.
I've read the Crucible parts because at first I couldn't understand it, but when I read it last month again, I could understand it properly.
Yes. And I guess with this also, it now puts everything into perspective for you.
Yes,
Yeah.
it does.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you very much, Sam.
You're welcome.
So are you gonna have another lesson next week or what?
Would you like? I can definitely do that, but you can instruct me in terms of, okay, I need for you to maybe talk to me about. You want to maybe do Life of Pi, or you want to do this, or you want to do a poem here or there or something.
Okay, no, it's fine. Then I will let you know then.
Okay. Yes. Would you like me to do another
Okay, then.
lesson on the Crucible?
What?
Is that what you want me to do? Another lesson on the Crucible?
No, I think Crucible is much clearer for me. We can just you said that paper 3 just
Oh.
yeah, but it's gonna more of
Yes, paper three is easy. The only thing I need for you to explain to you is the formats. I can't teach you how to write, but I can tell you for your let's just say your formal letter, this is where the address must go and this is where that must go. For your informal letter, this is where that must go and that is where that must go.
Okay. So for the format it's right hand, right?
Yes, yes. But I'll show
And
you.
then it's good.
Yeah,
Okay,
I'll
that's
show
fine
you
then.
all of that. Just get through paper two
Oh.
first.
Okay, no problem. Yeah.
Yeah. Then we'll discuss.
I will go through the stuff again.
Okay. Thank you, Sony.
Thank you.
Have a good one.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye
Thank
bye.
you. Okay, bye.
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 Bye. Don't worry about me.